Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. This time we're going to be looking at Ramp Dragon. So previously, in set 1, I suppose, Ramp Dragon was the sort of main archetype for Dragon, but ever since set 2 introduced Dragon Song Flute and Dracomancer's Rites, we've kind of seen more of a shift into the discard Dragon archetypes. But now with BP04, we've actually got some really good ramp tools back. So Ramp Dragon is back on the menu, and I think it's a really strong deck this format. It's been seeing some pretty good results, despite both of the top three Dragon, or two of the top three Dragon lists in Duluth being discard and the other being PDK. I think this deck still does have a lot of merit. There were still at least two more Ramp Dragons in the top 8 of the event, and plenty more across the other tournaments. As always, before we take a look at the list itself, this is meant to be more of a starting point, not optimized for any specific meta, so test it out yourself, change any cards that you don't like or you think might be better in other places, figure out how you like the deck best and how it best fits your meta. Looking at our 40 here, we do have a lot of the usual suspects for Dragon that you're going to see even in the discard list. We've got, Dragon Oracle, Dark Dragoon Forte. We've got Serpent Wrath, Blazing Breath, Dragon Warrior, all the usual sort of like removal pieces, storm pieces. We've got the one of Shenlong. But the big new things we got are more good ramp targets, mainly Israfil at the top end. We have Sibyl, a new 3-drop that's going to help us ramp better. And we have Dragon's Nest, which is a new 1-drop amulet that's going to smooth out our early turns and give us more sort of life gain and sustain. And card draw to get us into the late game with a bit more oomph. Our Evolve deck's going to look pretty standard. One Shenlong, so we can only play one Bellringer Angel, and 2 copies of the rest of our Evolves. And as always, you can check out the deck log page for this using the code in the bottom right. It'll also be in the description. It's going to be 1Z2Q4. Taking a little more detailed look at the deck, we have 25 followers, 12 spells, 3 amulets. So the amulets are a little new for Ramp Dragon, but the rest is pretty normal. Most of our spells are removal alongside the 3 Dragon Oracles for Ramp. Our curve is a bit higher than most of the decks that I normally like to post. Typically, I try to keep them limited to, at worst, 10 cards that cost more than 4. Ideally, only about that many that cost more than 3, unless they're really important. Here, we're looking at 16 cards at 4 and higher. 13 of those are at 5 and higher, which is a pretty high curve. But since we have ramp, we should be able to get there a little more easily. We have a decent bit of ramp in the deck, so hopefully we can just sort of play a little bit of a control game plan for the first 4 or 5 turns of the game, and then sort of shift gears into just dropping bomb after bomb until we can close out the game. As always, with Dragon, we have Bellringer Angel. This is kind of one of the only wards that Dragon is going to be playing a lot of. Ever since we lost Shenlong, it got limited to 1 instead of 3. Bellringer is pretty much the only ward that most Dragon lists are playing a lot of. So it's going to help protect us against things like King Elephant and Forest and just any other storm threats. But also at the same time, last words, it lets us draw a card. This is essentially just going to help reduce the overall size of our deck, help us dig for either our ramp pieces or more removal. Or in the late game, just threats to close out the game, ideally. It can evolve for 2, stays a 0-2, but has on evolve, select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage. This is obviously not really something you want to be doing turn 2, since we'd rather be playing Dragon Oracle. But if you have to, or if you need to do this turn 3, evolving Bellringer can effectively be like an early game Blazing Breath. And even if you already have Blazing Breath in hand, using Bellringer is going to allow you to keep that Blazing Breath until you hit Overflow and get the 4 damage value out of it instead of just 2. Really good to stop aggro decks, since you're going to be able to keep things like Perseus and Feria off the board. Really relevant against Sword and Haven. It can also be kind of relevant against Forest. Some of the early plays that they might make to try to push might only have 1 or 2 defense. So being able to clear those and also have a ward to block an attack from whatever the next thing they play is can save you, 4 leader defense here or there, and draw you another card to replace the Bellringer, which is just fantastic. 3 copies of Blazing Breath. This will always be here. This is pretty much just one of the best 1-cost removal spells in the game. It is at worst Angelic Snipe. It's going to deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. Once you're at Overflow, so 7 play points or higher, it'll deal 4 damage instead, which makes it a super efficient 1 play point removal. In the early game, as with Bellringer, it's going to be good against these sort of like 2/2 Goblin stat lines, or even some like 2-cost 3/2s. It can be really good at clearing those out and keeping you safe from aggro decks. And then in more mid-rangey strategies, once you hit Overflow, you can use it to clear things like Tin Soldier, Alice, any of the other 4/4 evolved followers, pretty wide range of things, or just use it as 1 play point that's dealing 4 damage to say an X7. Say your opponent has like a 7/7, you can Blazing Breath it and then finish it with like Dragon Warrior or something like that. And just for 1 play point, you're getting a lot of extra damage to help kill something. Dragon Nest is our first new card that we're playing from BP04. For 1 play point, we get an Amulet, activated ability, engage, sack this, give your leader +2 defense. If Overflow is active, draw a card. Sometimes you'll have to crack this in the early game just to stay alive against aggro decks if you don't draw good removal, but generally you're going to want to hold this until Overflow so that it replaces itself. In the past, if you don't draw Bellringer Angel, the deck hasn't really had great turn 1 plays, especially since Blazing Breath is pretty bad to like just hold up turn 1 against a lot of decks if they're not aggro decks. So this gives us something to just play on turn 1 while we're waiting for Dragon Oracle or waiting to play other things, or just round out our curve even on like 4, 5, 6. If we're 6 play points just playing an Olivia or a Conflagration, we can use our last play point for a Dragon's Nest, and then once we hit Overflow at 7, for 0 cost essentially, we can get 2 defense back and draw a card, which essentially kind of means we're just playing like a 37 card deck, since it's going to be replacing itself and we're going to be drawing other better cards. So it's really nice to see. Reading this card, it doesn't feel as powerful as it actually does in gameplay. Being able to effectively start the game at 22 or 24 defense just by having this in hand and knowing that it costs you basically no resources, since it is replacing itself, is just really strong. Great card to have. Then the life gain in this format, there's so much Storm, there's so much like burn damage, just really quick kills, that every bit of extra leader defense you can get makes a big difference. Moving to 2-drops, we have Shapeshifting Mage. This is a 2-cost 2/2. Fanfare, if Overflow is active, give this follower +3/+3. This will be a 5/5 once we hit Overflow, which means this card's good in both the early game and the late game. It can either be a 2-drop, or it can be your turn, 6 play on 7, or your turn, turn 6, turn 7, turn 8 play. And it's just going to be big and stick around as a threat the opponent has to answer. It can evolve for 1. It keeps its same stats, but it gains Assail and Bane. So this basically just turns it into early game a removal spell. Since Assail plus Bane means that it's going to be able to kill anything that it can actually attack, anything that doesn't have Intimidate, basically. So it's good against decks like Forest, or the PDK decks, where they might have either just really big followers, or followers that they don't want to ever engage, and are just kind of being annoying by existing. It can clear those super easy. Against, in the later game, if your opponent's playing, say, Israfil or anything like that, that's just a really giant threat you need to answer. For cheap, Shapeshifting Mage is, again, a good way to do that. Otherwise, he's going to be a 5/5 that's just going to stick around and be a nuisance for your opponent. They're going to have to answer, or it's going to start chunking away at him. Our only other 2-drop is Dragon Oracle. This is the card that we basically want to open every game we play. Even if we draw like 2 of them is great. Every one of these you draw just puts you essentially a turn ahead of your opponent, which means you can often be making really powerful plays like 3 turns before your opponent has like their equivalent plays. Just choose one of the following: either increase your maximum play points by 1 or draw a card. The draw a card isn't great. You don't really want to be paying 2 to draw a card, but if you're already at 9 or 10 play points and you draw more copies of this, if it's not eating into what you're doing for the rest of the turn, it's just worth cycling them, get other cards. But obviously, if you're trying to play like Israfil or Genesis Dragon, you're not going to have enough play points for it. These will kind of rot in your hand, but the payoff of drawing them early is definitely worth any sort of clunkiness late game. Dragon Warrior. We play 3 copies of. It's a 3-drop, 3/3 evolves for 1. Sort of the beauty of not having a lot of 2 and 3 drops that we really want to be playing on 3. So Dragon Oracle lets us skip 3. We go straight to 4. Makes going first really strong still. Even though you don't get Evo points, if you go first and play Dragon Oracle on 2, you'll still be able to play Dragon Warrior and evolve it on your 3rd turn, since you'll be at 4 play points. Curves out really nicely. So he's just 3/3 that evolves into a 4/4. On evolve, deal 3 to an enemy follower. This is really good, especially if you're playing against those like aggressive follower decks and you do take the turn off to Dragon Oracle. They're probably going to have multiple bodies that are attacking you and starting to chip away at you. Dragon Warrior can clear 2 of them for, pretty much free, and still leave usually like a 4/2 or a 4/1 body behind that the opponent is still going to have to put another card into, or it's going to either trade into a 3rd follower or start, hitting 4 face and putting them into pretty quick lethal range for a lot of your big storm followers. Sibyl of the Waterworm is our other 3-cost follower. This is the new legendary from BP04 that we're playing. It is a 3-drop, but ideally we're playing this later in the game than 3. However, if you do need to play it on 3, it still does really good things for us. So Fanfare, if Overflow is active for you, give this follower +1/+1 and increase your maximum play points by 1. So this is a ramp spell that the first time I read this card, it felt just really not good to me, right? Because you read this and it's a ramp effect that doesn't activate until you're already at 7 play points. And previously, what this deck wanted to do was try to ramp to 7 and then just start using all of its overflow effects. However, here, being able to ramp from 7 up to 8 and then untap on 9 the next turn is actually very powerful. It lets us hit a really good curve into either Israfil or Genesis Dragon, which either cost 8 + 1 to evolve or 9 to play. So it makes skipping 8 almost as good, if not better, than skipping 3. The second effect on Sibyl is start of the end phase, give your leader +1 defense. If Overflow is active, give +2 instead. This means that Sibyl, being a 3/4, is pretty big stat line that's kind of hard to remove. Like Surefire Bullet and things like that aren't going to answer it. Opposing Dragon Warriors aren't going to answer it unless it's engaged. So just being able to leave it sitting around for a turn, gain 1 or 2 defense, can also keep aggro decks off of you and just sort of help you get into the later game. And then once you hit Overflow, if you play this on turn 7, ramp to 8, and then gain 2 defense, after you like cracked 1 or 2 dragon nests, you can gain 6 or 8 defense in a turn, and you can turn a corner very fast. That makes it hard for your opponent to win. Our other 3-cost is a spell, Serpent Wrath. Quick timing, select an enemy follower on the field, deal it 5 damage, and if Overflow is active for you, draw a card. So this is another removal spell that if we have to play it early, we can. Ideally, we're holding it until we're at 7 play points so that it replaces itself, but 3 cost for 5 damage at quick timing is really powerful. It answers a lot of sort of early threats that most decks don't have answers to, especially at quick timing. Serpent Wrath is kind of the only thing that kills a lot of big followers. You look at Ancient Elf. If your opponent plays the mythical curve of turn 1 Spring Green Protection into turn 2 Ancient Elf, and they get a 5/5 on turn 2. If you untap on 3 in Serpent Wrath, cool, you've saved yourself a lot of trouble. Valiant Fencer is notably a 5/5. this can answer at quick timing. And Ether of the White Wing in the Haven decks where they're searching out Aegis. You're not going to be able to damage Aegis with a lot of your sort of removal spells, but clearing Ether can allow you to swing at Aegis a little easier and get it out that way. Since we do have followers big enough to clear an Aegis outside of our like removal spells. Moving into our 4-drops, we just play 1 4-drop, 3 copies of Dark Dragoon Forte. This has always been in Dragon since the beginning, doesn't matter really what build you're playing. 4-cost 5/1 Storm, that's a lot of damage. Evolves for 2 into a 7/3 with Storm and Aura. So obviously, like, not much to say about this card. It's 7 damage, it's Aura, so it's basically impossible to remove. There's only 1 spell in the game that can kill it, and it's not a very good one, and it's not in a very popular deck right now. So this is almost always 7 damage straight to your opponent's face, unless they have a ward. Best thing you can do with this, obviously you can just play it on like 5 going second or 6 going first, 7 your opponent and force them to answer it. Alternatively, if you play it 1 turn later where you can hold up a play point, if you can swing 7 at them and hold up a Blazing Breath to just hard remove whatever they try to swing at it with, that can almost win you the game on the spot if you can get a second hit of 7 onto your opponent afterwards. This card is kind of just the finisher that your opponent always has to beware as long as they're playing against Dragon. At 5, we have 3 copies of Dark Angel Olivia. Originally, I wasn't a huge fan of this card, but I think right now it's fine. It's 5-cost 5/5. Fanfare, choose up to 2 of the following. Option 1, gain an evolution point. Option 2, gain 3 leader defense. Option 3, draw a card. Option 4, each opponent discards a card. This card doesn't really affect the board as soon as it comes down, but if you're in a situation where you've answered your opponent's board on the previous turn and can just play this, even if they have like a follower that might hit you for 3 or 4 damage, you can choose the give your leader +3 defense option, and it kind of just like offsets the damage you're going to take, gets you whatever other option you pick, and leaves you a 5/5 behind, untapped, that they have to answer, which a lot of times is just enough on its own. Especially if you hit Dragon Oracle, you're doing this turn 4, which is, you know, a turn cycle before your opponent is really expecting to have to deal with a 5-drop or has the removal necessary to deal with a 5-drop. So like turn 2 Oracle, turn 3 Dragon Warrior clears 2 of their guys, and now they're on like 3 play points and have to answer a 4/2 or whatever is left. They're not really going to be able to establish their own board that leaves you in a spot where you need your Olivia to like affect the board, right? Whatever follower they play is just going to trade into your Dragon Warrior, or even if it doesn't, your Dragon Warrior can kill it while you play your Olivia. You're still on a favorable board position. Extra leader defense is always good, as with Dragon's Nest. Drawing a card is usually what you're going to go with, just to try to get more gas to keep winning the game. If you play this on a slightly later turn where your opponent, maybe they've already played out cards a few times and you've like board wiped them, if they're down to like a 2 or 3 card hand, making them discard a card can be really backbreaking and kind of win you the game that way. The evolution point option, there's pretty much only like 1 specific time you're going to be going for it, and that's if you play this at 5 play points and have Shenlong in hand. You can gain the evolution point so that your next turn can be Shenlong plus evolution. If you're going first, obviously. If you're going second, you don't need to pick the evolution point. The other is like maybe if you're untapping on 8, and you want to gain the evolution point to evolve your Israfil, but ideally we're playing Sibyl to skip 8, so that's not really going to come up as much as the Shenlong play on 6. Since like Olivia on 5, Shenlong Evo on 6, Sibyl on 7 into Israfil on 9 is a lot better of a curve, kind of what you're aiming for there. As I mentioned to the Shenlong, we play 1 copy because it is restricted to 1. This card is just absolutely turbo broken, and we're still going to play it in Dragon, even though the discard, you know, we're not discard Dragon, we don't care about the discard. It's still a 4-cost or a 5-cost 4/5 ward, which is reasonable stat line, a little small, but Fanfare, draw 2, discard 1 is card advantage. It lets us get the cards we want into our hand. It lets us discard maybe an extra Oracle that we drew and don't want, or an extra Bell Ringer that we don't want. And then for 2 play points, it evolves into a 5/6 that's going to give our leader +5 defense. This can offset like an entire attack or two of our opponent and be a ward that offsets another attack or two. So very often this card on its own is like 10 leader defense swing, where like you're just up 10 defense higher than you should be from playing it, which is what got it restricted. But we still want to play that because if we can hit it, it's still just really beneficial for us. Our last 5 cost card is Conflagration. This is a board wipe, deals 5 to each follower on the field. This is a little detrimental in that it does hit our own followers, but because of the way the deck plays, it doesn't often pose that big of an issue. Worst case, you swing with your followers first and then board wipe. But a lot of times, because we're just trying to curve out, you know, we might only be playing one card, one follower at each point of our curve, and if our opponent answers it, Conflagration's basically free to board wipe them. If we have any play points left over, we can play something after we use Conflagration. 5 is also just a really good number. If you're playing against Swordcraft, and they make like a big Valiant Fencer board, Conflagration's going to answer all of it. If you're playing against Forest and they go like big Ancient Elf plus a Tia board, Conflagration's probably going to answer all of it. So just really good against a lot of the decks that are popular in the meta right now. Definitely a card I would play 3 of, even if it seems like it's a little detrimental killing your own followers. Also of note, like if you have a Bellringer sitting around and you just have to Conflagration, you get to draw the card back, so like it doesn't really matter that much. Next up is Riko Kashimoto. This is a 6 cost 6/6. I think this card is kind of insane. Last set, during the set 3 format, I went on record saying this was probably the best card in the game. Set 4 format, I don't think it's the best card anymore. I think that's probably Israfil. But I think it is still very powerful, and in this deck specifically, it fits really well. Because, as I said, we're playing just like one follower on a lot of our turns. You know, if we're on 5 play points, we're playing just Olivia, probably. Or like just Forte and evolving it if we went second. Once we get to the point where we're playing Israfil, we're just playing Israfil. Yeah, we don't have the play points to play more stuff at that point, right? Like, these followers are huge. So like, on 5, I guess got the cards here, right? On 5, we might play Olivia or we might play Conflagration. Either way, if they answer the Olivia, we don't have another follower. If we just played Conflagration and passed, then we don't have any followers either. And our opponent's going to play a couple followers probably, and then we can play Riko, punish them by 2-for-1ing them and burning their face, and they probably still have to answer our 6/6. Later in the game, if we're playing Israfil and Genesis Dragon, it's just going to be one follower. And it's a follower that if our opponent does not answer it, we probably win, because we're hitting them for so much damage. If they do answer it, we just play Riko, punish whatever they played, sort of same story, right? And you might be saying, oh, but if they just played followers to answer, like if they answered your Israfil or Genesis Dragon and played maybe one follower or 2 followers, what are you attacking? Because they don't have any engaged followers. But the way this deck is built, you know, if you're playing against a dragon, the thing going through your mind is going to be, okay, well, they have Genesis Dragon or they have Forte, so we need wards, right, to protect us from all this giant storm damage. And if they play anything that they ward up, Riko just instantly eats it, burns them extra damage, and then you can follow up with your storm followers later. If they don't play anything that's like ward for your Riko to eat, then yeah, maybe you just jam the Genesis Dragon and kill them, or play a Forte and kill them. Forte is 6 as well, so like same part of your curve as Riko. So it's kind of a just like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Whether you ward or not, you either lose to Riko or you lose to Forte. So it puts your opponent in a really hard position. We only have 1 in the list, just because I do think all the other cards play a little more pivotal role. But Riko is a good way to just sort of like round this out. And I could definitely see if you wanted to cut down on like the 8 and 9 drops, fitting in a second Riko here. Speaking of 8 and 9 drops, moving up to 8, we don't have any 7 cost cards. Israfil is the new cover card legendary for BP04 Cosmic Mythos. 8 cost, 8/8. This card is massive. Fanfare, give your leader +4 defense. So on top of Dragon's Nest and Sibyl and Shenlong, This and Olivia. This is just even more leader defense. Dragon has the most healing out of basically any deck in the game right now, and it makes it incredibly obnoxious to kill. Once you get to the point where you're playing these Israfils and just gaining 4 defense, your opponent can't even attack you to like take that 4 defense back away because Israfil is so important to answer. Strike, you deal 3 damage to each enemy follower on the field. That's a board wipe against small decks. However, this evolves for 1 into a 10-10, which is insane that we're getting that much in stats off of just a 1-cost evolve. You look at all the other 1-cost evolves, it's usually just like 3-3 to 4-4, 5-5 to 6-6, or like 4-5 to 5-6. So you're getting +1/+1. Or maybe you're getting +0/+2 or +2/+0 for a 1-cost evolve. Normally you don't see +2/+2 until you get to like, you know, Forte is +2/+2 off of a 2-cost evolve. But nope, we're going straight to 10-10. Strike, deal 5 to each enemy follower on the field, which is even bigger. It's like a definite board wipe against almost everything. Whatever you can't board wipe, you're swinging your 10-10 at. Like, your opponent, even if you're not killing their guy because it wasn't engaged or whatever, your opponent has to answer your Israfil unless they can just kill you. Leaving a 10-10 on the board to go face on the next turn is basically an instant death sentence, and that's why we play 3. This card heals us, so it's like good to just play down and pass, and if it doesn't get answered, you win the game. 10-10 is impossible. As I said, this curves like perfectly with Sibyl. You play Sibyl on 7 at Overflow, you still have 4 play points to either play other followers or play removal spells. You could even play a Forte and swing for 5. Like if your opponent's tapped out and you know they're not going to have removal for your Forte. And then the next turn you're jamming Israfil, and what do? They have to find a way to answer a 10-10. We also play Genesis Dragon, kind of for the same reason. It's not as like big of a stabilization tool as Israfil. Israfil is a card that we can actually like play and then play another one and then play another one, and they just kind of keep dragging the game out into our favor. Genesis Dragon, on the other hand, is a card that it hits the board and the game is probably just over instantly. It's 10 storm damage. Israfil at least gives your opponent a chance to answer it. Genesis Dragon does not. Genesis Dragon, you play it, you hit for 10. It either kills your opponent or they now have to answer a 10-12, so you're probably not dead on the crackback. Just really powerful card. Again, curves with Sibyl super well. So just makes the deck flow a lot better than it used to. This is a set 1 card. We've always had this, but Sibyl really makes all the difference here in how well our late game flows once we hit Overflow. We're playing our big bombs a lot earlier, essentially. And Genesis Dragon is that big bomb. I've seen a lot of decks cut down to like only 1 copy of Genesis Dragon because really you can often just win off of your other cards sticking because they're so big anyway. You don't need the Storm. And if you wanted to cut that, you know, second Rico or I'm trying to think of what other options I've seen in Dragon. I know some people play Ayala, which is probably fine. Just as like it's a 3/2. It's ramp if they kill it. I've seen Lightning Blast. I've seen Execution. You could turn this into like more removal that way. But you know, test those out. Figure out which one you like the most. Right now, I'm just kind of on Genesis Dragon because I want to play Sibyl on 7 and then sort of end the game on the next turn or 2. Looking at the deck as a whole, the pros, it has a lot of pros. This deck is got a lot of things going for it. You got ramp that allows you to play much stronger things much earlier than other decks. Every Dragon, Oracle, or Sibyl you play is essentially you taking an extra turn. We have really powerful removal tools. We have like the best 1-cost kill spell, the best 3-cost kill spell, the second best board wipe, I guess, behind Themistocree. Like Conflagration. Conflagration is not Themistocree, but it is still really good. We have followers like Dragon Warrior, Shapeshifting Mage that remove things, Israfil board wipes. It's kind of just like everything's removal. It's either removal or it kills the opponent. We have multiple sources of healing. Dragon's Nest heals us, Sibyl heals us, Olivia heals us, Shenlong heals us, Israfil heals us. We have more healing than every other deck. You're basically never going to die. You can have like 40 plus defense in this deck. And we have high storm damage. Forte hits for 7 with Storm, Genesis Dragon hits for 10 with Storm. If the opponent ever lets their guard down and does not have a ward up, we can just kill them on the spot. So a lot of pros that make this like easy tier 1 deck. Cons, there's not as many of. It is weak to aggressive strategies in the early turns, because you are probably just going like Dragon Nest pass, Dragon Oracle pass. Your opponent gets a couple turns to like poke in at you, try to start chipping you down. Ideally, like Dragon Warrior fixes that and trades into everything they've already played. But if you don't draw the Dragon Warrior, or you draw like a lot of your high cost cards and don't really have efficient interaction, you can kind of fall short there and take a lot of early damage that puts you behind. And because the curve is high, it can make using play points efficiently difficult. A lot of times, if you end up with like 5 drops, 6 drops in hand, you might end up at a point where you have like 1 or 2 play points left over, but all you have are 3 drops and higher, and you can't use them efficiently. Which, you know, it is what it is. It's not the end of the world, but it does kind of suck sometimes, sort of losing out on that value. Otherwise, like, deck's just super strong. Once you get to Overflow, you've basically won the game because of how powerful your cards are. So your opponent has like 5 or 6 turns before that to get into a good enough position to win. And if they can't, well, too bad. Here is the whole deck one more time. Again, you can use the deck log code 1Z2Q4. Here is the Evo deck, and thank you for watching. I've been testing this deck a good bit. I think Dragon's really cool. Obviously, my teammates in Duluth played Discard, which I haven't actually been as big of a fan of this set. I think Ramp is probably the way to go. I played against a ton of Ramp in Duluth, and let me tell you, the deck is strong. It takes multiple elephants to get through that deck, and if you don't have multiple elephants, I don't really know what you're supposed to do. Deck is just really good. If there's any other decks you want to see me talk about, let me know in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and until I post my next video, there should be some on the screen for you to watch right now. And otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks.